I used to think that being available to everyone was a sign of my value. I was the one who always answered the late-night distress calls, the friend who never missed a birthday or a favor, the employee who said yes to every extra task. My phone was an extension of my hand, buzzing with messages and requests. I wore my constant availability like a badge of honor, not realizing it was slowly hollowing me out. Every notification felt like a lifeline, but in truth, I was drowning in them. I remember waking up at dawn after only a few hours of restless sleep, already anxious about who might need me that day. There was a heaviness in my chest that morning, a quiet whisper asking, "When is it my turn to be cared for?" I brushed it aside and reached for my phone like an addict, scrolling through emails, texts, social feeds, anything to feel needed, connected, alive. But the more I gave of myself to others, the more invisible I felt. I had mistaken being needed for being loved, availability for significance. In attending to everyone else's life, I had neglected the garden of my own soul. It was overrun with the weeds of outside expectations, my own desires strangled at the roots. Friedrich Nietzsche once observed, "The lonely one offers his hand too quickly to whomever he encounters." In my desperation to avoid my own loneliness, I had become exactly that lonely one. I offered my hand, my time, my energy to everyone who crossed my path, terrified that if I didn't, I would vanish into irrelevance. I couldn't stand the silence of being alone with myself, so I filled every quiet moment with someone else's noise. I thought endless empathy made me a good person, selfless, generous, dependable. But what I didn't realize was that selfless was becoming soulless. I had given away so much of my time and energy that I had nothing left for me. One evening, I hit a breaking point. After a day of juggling other people's problems and neglecting my own, I came home to an empty, dark apartment and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. I felt a wave of anguish rise up from a place I didn't even know existed. Tears I had held back for years finally flowed. I wasn't just tired. I was depleted, starved of the same attention and care I so freely gave to everyone else. In the darkness, I realized the cruel irony. I was always available for everyone, yet I felt truly unseen and alone. It was as if I had been pouring water into everyone else's cups while my own was bone dry. Something had to change. That night, through the blur of tears, I made a quiet vow to myself. I would stop being so available, not out of bitterness or anger, but out of necessity. I needed to find out who I was when I wasn't living for everyone else. I needed to finally hear my own voice beneath the cacophony of the world's demands. As I lay there in the dark, drained but determined, I felt a tiny spark of hope, an ember of truth glowing within the exhaustion. Maybe, just maybe, I could save myself from disappearing entirely. The next morning, I began my experiment in detachment. I turned off my phone for a few hours, a simple act that felt as daunting as shutting off my own breathing. Almost immediately, guilt clawed at me. What if someone needed me? What if I was disappointing them? I had always feared that if I disconnected, even for a moment, I would miss something important, that life would somehow pass me by. But I held firm, bracing myself against that wave of guilt and fear. And the world did not end. In fact, all those urgent things I was afraid to miss carried on without me just fine. Instead, something remarkable began to happen. In my first taste of real silence, I discovered I had been missing out on something far more vital than any news or message. I had been missing myself. In the silence that followed, I felt every inch of the emptiness I had been running from. It was uncomfortable, like standing in a deafening quiet after leaving a loud concert. My ears and my soul rang with the absence of noise. But after the initial discomfort, the quiet began to feel soothing, like a cool breeze after a long, stifling day. I realized that in my constant availability, I had been avoiding this very feeling, this confrontation with my own loneliness. Now, as I faced it, I found it wasn't as terrifying as I had imagined. It was, in fact, a kind of relief. Without the constant chatter, I could finally listen to my own needs. I took a walk alone under the early morning sky, the world still calm and gray. For once, I noticed the subtle things, the way sunlight slowly painted the rooftops gold, the sound of my footsteps on the pavement, the steady cadence of my breathing. These were details I never noticed when my mind was always on the next notification. In those quiet moments, I began to rediscover a person I had long neglected, myself. As days passed, my brief experiments with solitude turned into a new way of life. I started saying no to invitations that didn't nourish me, gently but firmly. The first few times I let a call go to voicemail or replied to a message on my time, my heart pounded as if I were doing something wrong. But each time, I reminded myself why I was doing this. I was not abandoning the world. I was rejoining my world. And with each boundary I set, I felt a small piece of my soul return to me. People's reactions were telling. Some friends, the true ones, responded with understanding or didn't even question my slower replies and newfound privacy. They simply adapted, giving me the space I was finally giving myself. Other people, the ones accustomed to my constant yes, grew confused or even frustrated. I received snarky comments like, "You've changed," or guilt-laden questions like, "Are you mad at me?" It was awkward at first to stand my ground in the face of those who expected the old me. But I noticed something critical. Those who truly valued me remained, and often respected me more. Those who only valued what I could do for them, well, they faded away when the endless well of favors ran dry. And good riddance. Why should I mourn the loss of relationships that only ever existed on the terms of my self-sacrifice? With each person I let go, or gently held at a healthy distance, I felt lighter. My life began to unclutter, not just physically, but emotionally. I had room to breathe. The constant background anxiety, this feeling of always being on call, started to dissipate. In its place came quiet, steady strength. I learned that no is not a dirty word, but a shield. No can even be an act of love. Love for oneself and love for others. Because an honest no spares everyone the resentment of a false yes. I began to appreciate the quiet power of disappearance. For once, I let my absence speak for me. I learned that sometimes silence is more powerful than words. By stepping back, I was reclaiming territories of my life that I had ceded to others. It felt empowering to become a little bit invisible, to not broadcast my every moment, to not be immediately reachable. In that invisibility, I became mysterious, not to others, but to myself. I found myself exploring my own thoughts and desires like uncharted territory. Who was I when no one was looking? What did I truly want, absent of others' expectations? In that open space of solitude, which I began to cherish as a sacred sanctuary rather than a void, real transformation took root. I started journaling again, filling pages with thoughts and feelings I hadn't had time to acknowledge. I picked up old hobbies, painting, playing guitar, creative outlets that had fallen away when I didn't have time. I sat with memories I had been avoiding, some painful, some beautiful, all revealing. It was as if pieces of myself that I had scattered in other people's lives were finally returning home, bringing my energy back to its source. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In the sanctuary of silence, my own darkness began to speak. I confronted the parts of me that were desperate for approval, the wounds that made me afraid to be alone. I remembered childhood moments, like sitting alone on the school playground after being excluded from a group, and realized how those experiences taught me to fear solitude, to equate it with not being good enough. These were shadows I had never dared to face, the very ones that had been driving me to overextend myself for years. By acknowledging them, by making these unconscious fears conscious, I started to take away their power. Shadow work is not gentle. It felt like pulling thorns from my heart. But with each thorn removed, I healed a little more. I began forgiving myself for the years of self-neglect. I even forgave others, understanding that my pain was never really their fault alone. It was mine, for allowing it. This realization was both bitter and sweet. Bitter because it hurt my pride to admit I had been complicit in my own suffering. Sweet because it meant I was no longer a victim of that pattern. I could finally do something about it. As I integrated these once hidden parts of myself, I found I was no longer triggered so easily by others. Criticism or rejection didn't cut as deep, because I knew who I was beyond the reflections in other people's eyes. I was developing a solid core, something Jung might call the self, the integrated whole of who I am. There is a profound difference between living as a fragment, scattered and defined by others, and living as a whole person, anchored in self-knowledge. Over time, the changes in me became evident. I carried myself differently, standing a little taller, moving a little slower, as if each step was mine to choose. There was a newfound calm in my presence. People around me sensed it too. Strangely, as I became less available, I became more authentically present when I did choose to engage. Because I wasn't exhausted or resentful, the time I spent with others was genuine and meaningful. I listened because I cared, not because I felt obligated. I gave what I could without draining myself. In preserving my energy for what truly mattered, I found I actually had more of it, a deeper well to draw from for the things and people I cherished. By not scattering my attention, I made my attention count. I also noticed that opportunities and people of substance started gravitating towards this new me. When you respect yourself, it subtly teaches others how to treat you. My boundaries began to communicate themselves. I was like a garden that finally put up a fence, not to keep everyone out, but to let the right ones in and give myself space to grow. Paradoxically, the distance I established didn't alienate the people who mattered. It drew us into closer authenticity. With the clutter cleared, my true relationships had room to breathe and grow deeper roots. There had been a fear that by stepping back, I would become isolated. But in truth, I had never felt more connected to myself, to nature, to the few deep relationships that truly mattered. The fears that once kept me leashed to my phone and chained to others' expectations were quietly dissolving. I realized that I had not been forgotten, nor had life passed me by because I chose to slow down. The world didn't forget me at all. It simply learned to appreciate my presence on my terms. Each day, I held my boundaries. Those old anxieties lost a bit more of their grip, replaced by peaceful conviction that I was exactly where I needed to be. In this journey of detachment and self-reclamation, I remembered another guiding truth. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For so long, I had lived as a watered-down version of myself, shaped by what I thought others wanted me to be. But each boundary I drew, each moment of silence I kept for myself, was like a chisel, carving away the excess and falsehood, revealing the form of my true self underneath. I was becoming who I truly am, and it felt like coming home. Now, everything is different. I wake up not dreading the day's demands, but feeling the day's open potential. In the morning quiet, I sit with a cup of tea, watching sunlight dance on the wall, feeling a gentle gratitude for the solitude. I savor the gentle curl of steam from my cup, and the way its warmth cradles my hands. The quiet isn't empty now. It's filled with contentment. My phone rests face down, silent and still, a tool for my convenience, no longer my tyrant. I move through my hours deliberately, choosing what to give my energy to, like an artist choosing where to place color on a canvas. Each yes I speak now comes from the heart, and I mean it fully. Each no comes from the same heart, honoring its limits. I've even noticed the change in my body. I sleep deeper through the night, no longer jolted awake by phantom notifications or racing thoughts. My breaths come easier. The constant knot in my stomach has unraveled. In the calm I've cultivated, my body and mind are finally in tune, resting in a peace I never knew when I was always on alert. When I do connect with others now, there is a sweetness to it, a mutual respect. I no longer pretend to be interested in conversations that don't nourish me. I no longer say, "I'm fine," when I'm not. I bring my whole self, or I don't bring myself at all. And the people in my life, those who have stayed, have welcomed this truer version of me. Because I am honest about my boundaries and feelings, I invite them to be honest too. Our connections, fewer but richer, are built on trust and truth rather than pretense. I've learned that detachment is not indifference. It's not that I care less about others. It's that I finally care more about my own soul. By preserving my energy, I can genuinely be there when it truly matters. By not being at everyone's beck and call, I am no longer a blurry background figure in my own story. I have become the protagonist of my life. Looking back, I hardly recognize the person I was. The change was gradual, like the slow spread of dawn's light, but it illuminated everything. Where once I was anxious and eager to please, now I am calm and self-assured. Where I once feared missing out or letting others down, now I see that what's meant for me will not pass me by. I have accepted that I am not responsible for anyone's happiness but my own. When I stopped being available to everyone, I became available to myself. And that changed everything. My life transformed in ways I never anticipated, quietly, deeply, irrevocably. I reclaimed the parts of me that were scattered and gave them a home. I became whole, and in that wholeness, I found freedom. I know there is no going back to the way I was. I will not return to that life of constant erasure. I cannot pour from an empty cup. and so I will keep mine filled. By loving myself first, the love and care I extend to others will be genuine and without hidden sorrow. Now I carry this lesson like a secret flame inside me. When you stop being available, everything changes. The world, surprisingly, goes on, but you finally begin